I think it's a pack of lies. She brings in, to hide the fact that Jan went with me voluntarily, they bring in aliens and mind-washing. It wasn't true.
Berchtold began threatening us. If you don't shut this book down or get rid of your book, I'm going to make your life as miserable as possible.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Sarah. I'm a certified coach specializing in abuse recovery from narcissistic, sociopathic, and psychopathic abuse. Today, we are covering part 2 of the janbroberg case. If you haven't seen part 1, it is linked down below. Please watch that before you come back here to watch this one. We left off last time with Jan coming back from her 2-week visit from Wyoming. On August 10th, 1976, Jan left a note in her bedroom under the guise that she ran away from home on her own when she actually took off with B. So the note she left for her parents reads, quote, "Dear Bob and Marianne, you won't let me do what's right, so I'll do what's wrong. I'm leaving without B and do not plan on coming back until you accept me as me. I cannot accept your religion or your screwed up morals. I just want to be me and have B. Please, before all of us are destroyed, let me go." End quote. When the Brobergs took everything in and realized that Jan was gone again after reading this note, they were again concerned with their precious reputation. They were worried about what the press would think, so they waited 2 weeks to report Jan missing. 2 weeks. The Brobergs called the FBI to investigate after those 2 weeks, and B was contacted. B said that he had no knowledge about Jan's location, and for 3 months, B was calling the Brobergs to talk about his fears and concerns about Jan's disappearance. The FBI knew B was involved and knew where she was. But let's talk about what really happened. So B crept into Jan's bedroom, and Jan has said that he did this 3 times before she was actually taken by B. And I say taken, even if you can say that she left by herself, she willingly left with B. She did not, because she was being manipulated. She's being brainwashed. She did what he told her and made her think it's what she wanted. But it's not what a normal little girl, little teen would want. So what happened was B crept into the room 3 times before he took her. He SA'd her during those times. And the 3rd time he did have her write the note and they left. And B took her to California and enrolled her in an all-girls Catholic school, where he claimed that she was his daughter and that he was in the CIA and was on the run. So B fabricated this story where he was a CIA agent, Jan was his daughter, and his wife passed away after an incident that concerned his CIA secret missions. And people were after him and Jan. So anyone who called the school asking for Jan was an enemy of the CIA. And they were there to harm Jan because his fake wife had already had her life taken by that secret work already. He was out there making outrageous stories and using his charm to make everyone believe him. The FBI began wiretapping the Broberg's phone to try to get any information from the phone calls B and Marianne were having. So by using the wiretap on the Broberg's phone, they traced B to his motorhome in Salt Lake City, Utah, and then they set up surveillance. So the FBI then questioned him in November of 1976, and when they did, they discovered a lot of posters of Jan around his home. Eventually, the FBI ended up following him to a payphone where B wrote down a number in the phone book inside, and once B left, the FBI found the number and found out it was for a boarding school where Jan was. So the FBI took B into custody on November 12, 1976, and brought Jan back home. So as B waits for his trial in jail, B allegedly hired 2 inmates to burn down Bob Broberg's flower shop and supposedly promised to give them in $1,000 per month for the rest of their lives if they went through with B's request. So the authorities alerted the Brobergs about what happened to their business as it was burned down, and Jan began blaming herself because she hasn't followed through with the mission the aliens assigned to her from B. She is not staying in contact with him. She was brought back. She wasn't reproducing anything for B or the planet or the aliens or whatever she is assigned to do. And she's taking all of this internally and saying it's her fault. She's completely going through this alone because she's keeping this all from her parents. She's keeping it from her sisters because she thinks she's protecting them. And B faced charges of kidnapping, arson, and burglary in 1977. But in Idaho's 6th District Court, B was acquitted of all charges due to reason of insanity. He was committed to 6 months in a maximum security mental facility. This man knew exactly what he was doing. This man is vile. He's the scum of the earth. And these types of people can never, ever change, no matter what treatment that you try to provide them. They just get worse. These people just get worse. They learn from their mistakes. B is sloppy. I think he's sloppy. I don't think that he's very calculated, like a lot of people have said, because of how sloppy he's being with the FBI, leaving things behind. How he thinks he's so good, he gets sloppy. When B got out of the mental facility, he actually stayed away from the Brobergs. The effects of what Jan went through still were weighing her down. And they weighed down the rest of the Brobergs as well. Jan still believed every word B told her and what the aliens said on tape. And this was terrifying to her because her 16th birthday was coming up. Jan did go to a summer drama camp, and when she was there, she ended up meeting a boy who bought her ice cream, and they liked each other, or they had a crush on one another. And remember all the lies that Jan was told by B? That if she talked to boys, if she talked to a man at all, even if it was her father, she'd be vaporized. Karen would go blind. Susan would take her place. Bob would no longer be alive. Jan was freaking out because she almost forgot what would happen to her. And she didn't want any harm to come to the boy. She didn't want any harm to come to her family. So she panics and she calls her mother to see if everyone's okay in the family. And Marianne did mention that their dogs were sick. That Jan's family had 2 dogs. And Jan believed it was all her fault for not completing the mission and talking to a boy. She's like, oh, it's real. Everything's being confirmed. Like, my father's shop is burned down. Now my dogs are sick. What if they are not gonna make it? Now what happens if it's my family members? What happens if this boy has something done to him too? Because they didn't mention what would happen to him. Like, they said, don't talk to your father, but maybe his life will end too. So the next day, Jan was preparing herself to tell Susan she would have to take over Jan's mission to save the planet. But Jan called Marianne, and the family dogs were doing better. Jan started getting confused because that's not how it works in this whole scheme of things. It's not how it works at all. So reality started to set in when Jan turned 16. She wasn't vaporized. None of her family had anything wrong with them. Susan didn't have to take her place. And this is really when Jan finally opened up about all of the traumatic experiences that she faced from the hands of B. Because she knew now that everything was all a lie. And that's really when the trauma probably really hit her, because that's typically when we feel it the most, when we realize every little thing was all fabricated. It's absolutely disgusting. And this is when the Broberg family came together to move forward after their traumatic experiences with B. Jan pursued acting, which was a part of her healing space because it became her creative outlet where she could share her emotions on stage and she could actually let herself be someone else. So in a way, Jan was kind of disassociating due to her trauma and was trying to use her acting as a form of escapism so she could live with the horrific events that she was forced to endure until she did go and she got therapy, she got the help that she needed, and she could still continue her acting. Marianne wrote a book about Jan called Stolen Innocence in 2003. So Marianne and Jan ended up going on a speaking tour to share their story, and B started to show up at these events to try to talk to the media and shut down these events because B was claiming that the Brobergs were spreading lies. That's really funny coming from him, isn't it? So Jan quickly filed a stalking charge, and she was granted an entire lifelong restraining order from B. So B could never be around her again legally. So for the rest of B's life, he could not be around Jan. But in 2005, something else happened. Do you think that a restraining order would really stop this man? Of course not. No matter what age B was, he was sick and he still remained sick. B ended up getting into a fight with bikers against BACA, and was charged with 3 felonies and 2 misdemeanors. Unlike before, B wasn't so lucky with the law. He was found guilty and was scheduled to be sentenced, but didn't want to go to jail. So B ended up taking his own life in November of 2005. I don't feel like there was justice for this case. Jan was able to keep her connections with her family, and they were able to help her give the support that she needed so she could get better and become successful. But the things here that really bother me is that I found clips online of a Dr. Phil interview with Jan and Marianne, and I believe her sisters. I cannot find the full clip of the Dr. Phil interview, but these clips really infuriate me because it's 2017 and Marianne is saying this stuff. She's like, well, my heart was beating for B. And she was talking about how the affair was never a physical thing. It was just how B and her never had anything physical. And I'm like, excuse me, what? How can you go on national television and say that, but also record a Netflix documentary in the same year and then change your story entirely?
Robert's charisma was quite enticing to the family. He was so suave. He seemed to have all of the charm. I fell in love with Robert because of his great attachment to me. Robert and I never crossed any lines. It was never physical. I did have a heartbeat for him. Over and over and over. And he kept telling me, we could have a great life together, Marianne. All you need to do is get divorced, come and live with me. It was not long before he was holding my hand and then was stroking my leg. And, you know, he poured his heart out, his soul out. I stayed too long at his motorhome, and we engaged in necking and kissing and then eventually in sexual intercourse. I loved my husband, but I betrayed him. After it happened, I knew that I had crossed the path that I could never go back.
And get this, when they were talking about the affidavits and why they signed them, Marianne said on the Dr. Phil interview,
we didn't press charges because there was no child abuse laws established in the state of Idaho. We tried to keep Jan away from Robert, but he was livid. When Robert took Jan the first time, I wasn't overly concerned and worried because of Robert's devotion to our family, and I was certain he wouldn't do anything to harm Jan.
You didn't know what he was doing. None of us did.
No, we didn't. We didn't know his power, and his end result was you, and he was going to have you no matter what. It was on Christmas Eve when Gail Berchtold came to the door and asked to talk to Bob alone. The two of them went back to the den and chatted for quite some time. Gail came out, went on her way, and then Bob said to me, Gail wants us to drop all the charges against her husband. She asked us to sign some affidavits. All Bob said was, if we don't sign these affidavits, they're going to expose dirty laundry between me and Berchtold. I was quite shocked. I felt terrible, especially for my husband. I just thought, oh, no, that can't happen. So we signed the affidavit.
Okay, so where Mary Ann goes and says that there was no CA law in Idaho in the 1970s, that's irrelevant, because guess what? There was another case. It was the Lindbergh kidnapping case. And that actually led the U.S. Congress to pass the Federal Kidnapping Act. It's also called the Lindbergh Law. So that act made kidnapping a federal offense and allowed federal investigators the authority to pursue kidnappers across state jurisdictions and across country borders. It also caused those offenses to potentially be punished by life-ending sentences. It was passed in 1932. So there is absolutely no excuse for Mary Ann to be on here saying, oh, well, there was no child abuse laws in Idaho at that time. And there was crappy laws in Idaho at that time. They had a lot of exemption for CA, but the CA would be more for parents, not someone who abducted a child and took them to Mexico from Idaho, and then again to California from Idaho. So right there, they had federal offense. So there is no excuse. She's just trying to cover herself so she looks like a good parent. She's not. And she's not fooling me. She's not fooling a lot of other people, because guess what? We're going to do our research, and we're not going to be fooled by people who are trying to manipulate. This is not okay. I don't like how someone can go and change what already happened. It's not okay. And even if they recount it now and they're sticking to their story now, why did it have to be that? I mean, everyone already was upset with the case, and they were name-calling the parents. The Broberg parents were naive, they were gullible, they were too trusting, they had no boundaries, and chose to ignore the red flags. And I know I can see that Bob regrets it, and Mary Ann says she regrets it, but what matters is the connection that Jan has with her family. And if she finds them redeemable, because that's no one's choice but hers. Even though I don't think that I could ever have a relationship with Mary Ann if she did that to me. It's not the fact that Jan was taken once, but it's the fact that Jan was taken twice. And the communication wasn't stopped when the FBI told them to. And Mary Ann decided to continue that affair. Was Mary Ann manipulated and infatuated with this man because he charmed her? Yes. But is that really worth it to expose your child to a predator? I don't think so. But Mary Ann has went on to do things for children. She became a social worker, and she actually was helping children in foster care and in adoption. Mary Ann was helping to find lost children, passing bills in Idaho due to what happened to her daughter. So there's a lot of stuff that people don't tell, and I want to tell it. I find a lot of inconsistencies with like how something was said on the Dr. Phil interview and how something else was said on the Netflix documentary, and all the stuff with the newer documentaries with A Friend of the Family and the drama of The Friend of the Family. But to me, I just feel like I had to share this case because we have to look that grooming isn't always what people think it is. Because when we look at grooming, we typically see, oh, the predator is going to go for the family who is broken. Like, oh, they have one parent, or they have two parents that fight all the time, or abusive parents, or parents that are extremely neglectful. They're going to look for someone who's poor, who is isolated, someone that someone does not care about. But in this case, they chose a well put together family. And I'm going to say that the Brobergs were a well put together family before B, because they had each other, and the guise of this was this predator B put himself out there as, I'm a father. You're a father, Bob. I go to church. You go to church, Bob. I have all these kids. You have your kids. Like, I'm going to be fun with your kids. Oh, hey, let me go to Jan. Hi, Jan. And he had a nickname for Jan, and that was Dolly. If old men are calling your child Dolly, that is a red flag in itself. Why are you calling her Dolly? Where did that come from? Jan said he had other nicknames for her, but the one that stuck out to her the most was Dolly. Just gross. Jumping backwards a little bit, everyone kept saying that they didn't know what a pedophile was. So that's why this case wasn't a huge red flag when B was taking Jan. And to me, that's absolutely ridiculous, because it doesn't matter if you knew the term pedophile, but it matters that you know what a creep is. Like, I know everybody knew what a creep was, even back in the day. Okay? When someone gives you weird vibes, you trust that gut instinct and you get out of there. I don't care if it's your uncle, your cousin, your mother's cousin, a teacher, anybody. I don't care who it is. The people closer to you are most likely the people who are going to do something like this. But everyone, I would like to make sure that no one spreads hate to Jan or her family. We can be angry that this situation happened, but we have to remember that this falls on the shoulders of B, because he is the one who chose to do everything. He chose to play everyone like his pawns in a game of chess. So as outrageous as this story is, we have to remember who the true evil is, and that is B. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. What do you think? Do you think B was a master manipulator, or do you think that the Broberg parents were just naive? If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Lock your doors and stay safe.